Hey everybody, Hunter back again from Showtime Studios. Update on the Bedford and a little bit more of a tutorial on the salt technique. As you can see here, we have it in the green that I mixed up. And this is actually a combination of Tamaya Park green and a little bit of British racing green, and it came out pretty good. It's the color I'm looking for. It's got that old style look to it, and that's what I'm after. Now you can also see in here, if we can get it to zoom in, I've been working on the chipping process a little bit on the salt technique. You'll see the primer spot showing through there, and you can see how it's kind of subtle. It's not really real bold and in your face, but it's a neat technique. And the other thing that I didn't mention in the first video on the salt technique is always remember that even though you're doing a weathered finish, you want to make it still to the, I guess you could say, subtle. You don't want it too heavy and just ridiculous looking. You want to try to keep, refrain a little bit from going crazy with it. But on the flip side of that, don't, when you go in to do your say you want to model something like we're doing here, an older build that's going to have a lot of age on it and a lot of chipping, a lot of paint peeled off of it. Remember, when you're going in to do the salt technique, when you put the water on, if you cover more area than you think that you need, that's going to be a good thing, because like I say, when you're done and you come back in and chip all this salt off, it's going to be a very subtle technique. Now you can see here underneath of the fuel tank, let's see if we can get it to zoom here. See underneath the fuel tank where I've got it all chipped off, I took all the salt off of it. Now you'll see all the salt up here inside the frame. And like I say, when you're first putting that stuff on, it's going to look like, oh wait, that's way too heavy. I don't want that. But once you get all the salt out of there and get those bumps of the salt gone, it takes on a whole different appearance and looks very good. At least I think so. And on this part of the tutorial, what we're going to do is start taking this salt back off. Now, there's several different ways you can go about doing this. I remember in one of my earlier videos that I did on the salt technique, somebody left me a thumbs down and sent me a message and said that the way I was doing it was wrong. Okay, well, I explained to this person that sent me that message that, basically, whatever. If you feel it's wrong, then, that's your opinion. That's, you're entitled to that. That's great. But let me tell you guys, there's really no wrong way to do this. All you're doing is putting some water down on the surface, sprinkling some salt on it, painting the model, and then you're taking the salt back off to finish. That's all you're doing. And like I say, you have so much freedom to figure out which way you want to do it and how much you want to do it, how little you want to do it. The other thing that this guy made mention of was the way that I was taking the salt off the model was not proper. And I'm going to show you several different ways that you can do this, and they all work. And you can do a combination of those and make a different effect. So one way that you can do it is you can come in with a little bit of water, and you can rub that with a little bit of water. And depending on what paint you use, if you use an acrylic, this works easier. In this case, this is a synthetic lacquer from Tamaya, but it will still work. You can come in with that water and a brush, and you can kind of scrub it around, and it will take the salt off of your finish. And then you can come in with a piece of paper towel or whatever you want to use for this, and you can dry up that area that you just did that on. That's one way you can do it. And we'll show, it's right here in this area. I'll hold it up here and show you how that came out. That's what it looks like with just the water technique. That works. You can use that. And I do that technique like right in here in between the frame and the springs. It's real tight in there. Sometimes I will go in on that particular area with the water on the brush, and I will go ahead and scrub that. And what that'll do is get the bristles of the brush down in between the frame and the spring, and the water that's down in there when you rub that back and forth, it will take the grains of salt out of that area. So there's another way that you can do it. Nothing wrong with it. It works. If you get into an area that is a flat area and easy to get to, let's see, we'll hold it up here. I'll show you this area right back. This area right here on the frame. You can see all them pieces of salt that's sticking up there. Here's another way you can do it. You can take a toothpick and you can lay that toothpick down and you can scratch it across that frame and knock the salt right out of there. No problem. We'll hold it back up here again, let you get a view of it. If you remember exactly where it was, get it to focus here. And we knock that down with a toothpick. Another way, you can go in with a dry brush. This is a shorter bristle brush here. And if you try to scrape the finish real close to the ferrule of the brush, these bristles are kind of stiff, and we're doing this dry. You can do it that way. You can come in and scrape it, and it will knock the salt right off. Some areas are a little bit trickier than others, but for the most part, it will knock the majority of the salt off of the finish, and you're good to go. So there's another way you can do it. Another technique you can use if you want a little bit more scraping as you're taking the salt off, you can come in with your number 11 blade, and you can come across those salt particles while they're sitting on there. And you can take your number 11 blade and just kind of scrape that very lightly. I'm using the weight of the blade to scrape these. And you can scrape that salt off that way. It gives you a little bit of a different technique and a little bit different outcome on your finished product. So you have that way to do it. And then you can come in with a piece of towel. We had a little bit of moisture there. You can wipe that off and you're good to go. It took a little bit of paint off the edge of the frame. It gave us a bunch of little dots. Let me hold up here and see if we can see this. There you go. It gave us a bunch of little dots on top of the frame. And that's something that we didn't get with using the other techniques. And then another technique that I use also is I have a brass brush. It has pretty soft brass bristles in it. And same thing. You can go in, we've got some salt here on top of the spring. You can go in and you can hit that with the brass brush. And another thing that the brass brush will do is it actually takes the paint off of the edges of stuff. So it gives you almost a dry brush look as you're taking the salt off of your model. Now, you have to be a little bit more careful with the brass brush because you can take too much paint off and you don't want to do that. But just go in and it will work. I mean, you can do it the same way. Basically, there is nothing wrong with doing this, and it works. It gives you another, kind of way to weather as you're taking the salt off the finish. So, and like I say, you can go in and do a combination. You can go in with the toothpick first. You can do a little bit with the number 11. You can take a little bit more off with the dry brush, and then go in and hit it with the brass brush. No wrong way to do it. So, it's kind of funny. This guy come in and said, oh, well, you're doing this wrong. You're doing this wrong. And I'm like, okay, well, how can I be doing this wrong? Because all you're doing is taking the salt back off the finish. And depending on what tool you take it off with, kind of dictates, what type of finish you're going to end up with. Now, as you can see now, I'm going in with the brass bristle brush, and we are, working on the sides of the frame. And we're knocking the salt right off of there. It's looking good. We got a little bit of an area of buildup right here next to this bracket. We'll go in with the toothpick. We'll get up right next to the edge of that bracket. Get that out of there. You can even come in with the brush now, with your dry brush, and finish that area off. Just like that. And there you have it. And like I say, There is nothing hard about it. There is no wrong way to do it. Anybody that tells you that you're doing this technique wrong is full of it. There is just so many different, and that's not all the things you can use to do it. So pretty much anything that you have laying around at your workbench, you can use to take this salt back off the finish and create different variances and different looks in your weathered finish. Now, the one thing I would highly recommend for everybody out there, and especially for you guys that are going to try this and go into competition, anywhere that you have a little bump of that salt, make sure that you get it off the finish. It does become a little bit time consuming, but make sure that you get all those little particles of salt off the finish. Because what will happen is when you go in and the judges that know what they're looking at, and they look down at that and they know that this is a salt technique, they're going to start looking for little pieces of salt that you left behind. You don't want that. Now, if you're trying to simulate bubbled paint or something like that, you want to make note on your description sheet that some of the areas are, simulating bubbled or, kind of pushed up pieces of paint or sections of paint or whatever. But if you're not putting that on your description sheet, make sure that you get all that salt back off the finish and get it back to being smooth again. So we're going to spend about probably another hour or so getting all the salt off of this, getting it down to the way we want it. We'll come back. We'll do another update when we're done with that. We'll show you the next steps that we're going to do, and we'll continue from there. So like always, if you have any questions or concerns, leave me a comment on the video. And I want to thank everybody again for watching and all the nice comments, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.